Welcome to the S.E.M podcast. Got another episode here. Tonight I'm joined by Richard Dunn. And where are you calling from tonight?
I'm in Sandy, Utah, kind of southeast suburb of Salt Lake, for those who might not be familiar with the area.
All right. All the way from Sandy. Glad you could join us tonight. So the format here, we run through, how you got the call, how you ended up in Scotland, and then we'll catch up with you, what you've been up to since you got back from the mission, and then we'll go back and reminisce. So if you want to start us out with how you ended up there.
Yeah, certainly. So I actually had two friends from high school. They were a year ahead of me, Clark Davis and Kent Carish, who were in Scotland. I think they'd been there since like April, May-ish of the year that I was graduating high school. And I had been, like many others, thinking about a mission and how to kind of prepare and what to do, and did all the work beforehand to get ready, mission prep, the paperwork, vaccinations, wisdom teeth, all of the above. And I sent in my papers, and Kent and Clark, I just thought Scotland was an incredible place. I was really excited for both of them to go to the same mission. They were also friends.
They're like best friends. So.
Yeah, great, just great guys. And Kent, I played soccer with him at Skyline High School in Salt Lake for, I think, 2 or 3 years, and got to know him really well. And anyway, so the fact that both of them ended up in the same mission was kind of already unprecedented, so I didn't really think it was a possibility. I always thought, like, my dad went to England on his mission, so I always had kind of an inkling for the British Isles, and I sort of thought I would go to Brazil, or at that time there were just a lot of people going to Brazil or to South America. Yeah. And eventually I got my call. These are the days when I think they showed up on Wednesdays in your mailbox. If you lived in Utah, there was kind of like every Wednesday you were sort of on the watch. And I'm not the type to have like a big gathering or get a bunch of people together. So I actually took my call, took it by myself up into my room and opened it on my own. And I actually didn't see the mission call as I opened up the papers. I remember it very vividly. I read through the letter, or I thought I had read through it, didn't see anything, and then I opened up a page or two later, and there was a map of Scotland that shows kind of your mission call and where you would be. And it was just an incredibly thrilling moment. I had been writing to Kent at the time and kind of hearing about his mission, and just I was really elated. I couldn't believe it. It felt like the perfect fit for me at the time, and it absolutely was as I got into the mission and got into the work there. So that was kind of my first taste of excitement about the call. After that, I had a lot of people contact me that they either knew people in Scotland or had been there themselves, and just kind of got more and more excited. I remember distinctly, like, reading through his president, Randy Wilkinson was there at the time, and there was kind of here are the things you should bring. I never heard of a duvet or duvet cover at the time, and I ended up buying, you had to buy one of those when you got there. Kent advised me to take a sleeping bag, and I never used the duvet cover that I bought. But it was just kind of fun to get into the prep of, do I need a trench coat, and do you need like thermal garments and all those things that they talk about in there. So it was a great, I think it was probably about 3.5 months before I left in late October for the mission. And at the time, I think this is still the case. I went to the Preston NTC. I remember getting there from, I think we flew into Manchester, and from Chicago, and it had been like a day's worth of travel, and then you kind of show up and get started right away. Elder Bhutan, Arthur, I think it's Arthur Bhutan, he showed up in sweatpants, which I'll always remember. He had to change into a suit really quickly. But that was just, the MTC was a great start. I think there were about 40 missionaries there, some going to England, some were like German or Russian missionaries coming over and then going back to missions in Europe. Elder Luke Newcomb, that was there from Australia with another Australian, and just another sort of thrilling start to the mission. We got to play football on the grounds there, and go around Preston and see some of the old church sites. So all in all, it was just a kind of a magical experience. I think.
What was the timing of that?
So I would have been there probably, it was almost 20 years ago, almost exactly. So I would have been there, I think I left October 30th of 2002. So that would, and then I think the MTC at the time was like 2.5 weeks, something like that. Yeah. So that was when I ended up there. There were a few of us going to Scotland there. I think there were a lot more kind of English missionaries and others in the MTC, but that little group, we kind of stayed together and were able to keep in touch. But anyway, the MTC was great. I was semi-prepared. I mean, maybe most people show up that way, but as far as like the lessons and other things, and had a great time there in the MTC. But yeah, from sort of day one, I felt like it was the perfect fit. We have, at least on my dad's side, a great deal of Scottish heritage in the Kirkintilloch area near Glasgow, and had just a great connection to the country already. So it was a great start.
Excellent. So let's fast forward then to 2004. Yes, and you came home probably, I think because of the visa changes, we all came home about 2 years exactly. So
yeah.
What have you been up to since then?
A lot. I mean, it's been a long time. So I got home in November and got working in construction a little bit. I started at the University of Utah. It would have been that January semester, and kind of noodled around with a few different majors. And I lived at the time, I started out in East Mill Creek. I moved to the Avenues, back to East Mill Creek, sort of during all my University of Utah years. So I did that for 4.5 years. It took me to graduate, and I met my wife towards the latter part of my bachelor's degree. My wife, Katie, we were married the summer after I graduated in 2009. So that'd be August 2009. And we lived in the Sugar House area while I was working for a few different healthcare jobs. And then Katie was a teacher, and I decided to go back to graduate school in healthcare administration. So that's kind of like an MBA specifically for the healthcare field. And I looked at a few different places, ended up going to UNC Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So Katie and I moved there in August 2011. Did 2 years in the program, graduated in 2013, and then we moved to the Denver area out of school. So I lived in Lakewood, which is kind of a western suburb of Denver, right, kind of near Golden and off the 70. Do one of you live in Denver?
We both live in the Denver area. So Zack lives down south, and I live up north. He lives real close to the Denver Temple.
Oh yeah, Centennial, that area.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, so I lived in Denver. That was kind of my first real job with Centura Health. I was what's called an administrative fellow, which is kind of like a residency for healthcare administrators. It's just kind of a 1-year internship. And I worked in strategic planning after my internship or my fellowship for Centura. We ended up living in Denver for just about 2-ish years in Lakewood there. My first son, his name is James Sterling Dunn. He's named after our Scottish ancestor. Sterling, the real way to spell Sterling, Stirling,
Nice.
like the city. So he was born right before we left North Carolina. We moved to St. George, Utah. I started working for Intermountain Healthcare in 2015 and spent about 3.5 years there. 2 more kids were born, Alexis and Cameron. And then I stayed with Intermountain Healthcare. I moved up to the Salt Lake area and still been working in strategic planning and business development for Intermountain. And I've been here in Salt Lake area for about almost 4.5 years. And so we live in Sandy, as I mentioned earlier. It's a great spot, close to the mountains, the resorts, mountain bike trails, all of the great stuff you hear about Utah. But so that's kind of the journey so far. I've lived in a bunch of different places and kind of made it back to the Salt Lake area. I grew up in Holiday, and so it's nice to be back. It's also nice to kind of be in a different part of the valley from where I grew up. So
great. Yeah. You've lived a lot of places that Zach's lived. So he's from Sandy.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'll have to catch up with him sometime. I really liked Denver. When we were there, this was like 2013, 2015-ish. It was what I thought was sort of unaffordable. I know it's a lot worse.
Everywhere's a lot worse now.
Yeah, but we really liked it there. I mean, Lakewood was a great spot. I worked for Centura. I lived right by St. Anthony Hospital, if you know where that is, just off the 6th and Union there. And I loved it, but like as we looked to grow our family, we just thought we need to go somewhere else. So St. George was a great solution for that. Thought I'd be there a little bit longer, but it was great that we could be there anyway.
Cool. Is your wife from Utah too then?
Yes. Yeah. She grew up in the Sugar House area. She went to Highland High School. She played volleyball at the University of Utah. She was a setter. So has a lot of good connections here. But she's also enjoyed, like, when we lived in North Carolina, she taught school there and made a lot of great friends. And Denver, St. George, she's enjoyed kind of living away as well. But she is a native of this area.
Great. All right, so we'll go back now. You can start in the MTC. You talked about that a little bit. If you want to start with getting to the mission, however you want to start that timeline, and we'll go.
Yeah, of course. So I believe we took the train from the MTC, which was the train rides there and probably all over the British Isles. They're great. I mean, the scenery and just the experience of going on a train. But I remember getting there and up to, I think is it Haymarket, the station that we got off to go to the mission home there. Piled into a big white van that I think had a trunk on it for 2 huge suitcases that we were allowed to bring, and got to the mission home, met President Wilkinson and Sister Wilkinson there, and just kind of thought like, wow, this is, the mission home. It's in one of the nicest neighborhoods in Edinburgh there. And kind of as you roll up to it, I'm like, oh, wow, this is exactly what I imagined Scotland to be, like these big, nice mansions and so green and clean.
The mission president in my home area, when he found out I was going there, he said, "Oh, I've been to that mission home. It's a castle."
It is
sweet, and that's kind of it is. It's an old mansion and kind of built like a castle. So
it's so nice, and the grounds and everything there. It's just it's an incredible mission home. It's got to be one of the best in the world as far as mission homes are concerned. But I still remember very vividly the 2 APs that picked us up and kind of getting and arriving at the mission home. And so when I got there, there's kind of this ritual or routine that everybody's familiar with, where you get assigned a trainer. And when I got there, I knew that Kent was in the mission, Kent Carish. And then everybody sort of shows up, the trainers, and And I thought, oh wow, it's great to see Kent, and we kind of waved at each other. And then as we got sort of paired off, he ended up being my trainer, which I was just flabbergasted. I thought, like, wow, and I think President Wilkinson afterwards told us, like, we fought it and we knew that you knew each other, but felt it was right. And so that was another great start. Kent and I were in canvas laying, so as part of the Glasgow area at the time. It's just on the other side of the Clyde. I guess that'd be the western side of the Clyde. So like Rutherglen, Castlemilk, and some other areas. So kind of going from the mission home, the Edinburgh Mission home, as you take the train and get to Glasgow, things change pretty quickly. The landscape, the scenery, and then as I got into canvas laying, it just had a very different feel from Edinburgh. You know, a lot of the council housing, and you remember all the houses with the rocks in the exterior that you'd always pick at when you're capping. But we got to our place and sort of got started right away that night, getting groceries and all that at Asda. But Kit and I, it was, and if he ever listens to this, I think he'll agree with me. It was kind of complicated being friends, and also kind of like having a trainer who wanted to run me into the ground and make sure I was going to be an obedient missionary. And so we were together, I think, for 3 months, and kind of roamed around all that area. We spent a lot of time in like Burnside and some of the other neighborhoods. There's another place called the Gorbals, which, if anyone is listening who served in canvas laying, there are these 7 high rises. I think they've been raised now, but just a very tough area. But we spent a lot of time going through and chapping. But I'd probably say at that time we were knocking doors and chapping probably like 75-80% of the time. The branch there was relatively small, so we didn't have like a lot of dinner appointments, and we just kind of drilled it on knocking doors. There wasn't really a great spot for, we called it GQing, but kind of street contacting.
Yep.
In canvas laying. But anyway, it was just a fabulous start. I think I sort of expected the weather to be a lot colder and more miserable, and I think I handled that better than I thought. But yeah, just getting used to riding buses and getting your weekly bus ticket and getting all the routes down and figuring out where to go and how to get there. That was just kind of a brand new experience for me. Of you have to kind of plan your day around the bus routes, and
That's cool.
It was great.
I consider Elder Karras he's like a trainer to me too. He's my second companion, but man, I learned a lot from him. I served with him his last 6 weeks. So.
Oh, great! Yeah, I'm glad you know him.
Oh yeah.
We still stay in touch, and he's in Reno now. I believe he's still there, but
I'm trying to get him on here, so you gotta help me.
Yeah, I will. I'd love to hear from him and hear what he has to say about our time together and all that. But it was great. I think even like P days, we occasionally went into Glasgow and met with other zones there in the city center, and just we played a lot of football with some of the other missionaries in there. Your East Kilbride did a lot of exchanges with the East Kilbride team, and anyway, it was a great couple months, great start to the mission. I stayed there. So Elder Karras was transferred. I stayed there. I was with Joseph Morgan for another 3 months. So I was a total of 6 months in canvas laying.
Okay. Did you and Ken whitewash in?
No, he was there, I think, with Patrick Mann, Elder Mann, before I got there, if I recall correctly. So he'd been there at least 6 weeks, if not 3 months, before I got there. I could be wrong about that. He'll have to confirm for me. But so Joseph Morgan was another senior companion I had. Loved him. We had a great time. He introduced me, I remember, to Cornish pasties and gravy granules, and some other delicacies. That's another thing. I think the food, like people would warn me about it. I loved it. I loved fish and chips. I loved kebabs and all of the different takeout options we had. We had a great bakery right near us, and Greg's that wasn't too far. If anyone remembers Greg's Bakery, but
Cherish introduced me to that in the first area. We woke up early so we could get to Edinburgh before a zone conference or something. He's like, we've got to go to Greg's.
Yeah, so, I love Greg's, and like people that I talk with in my work or that I meet that have a UK connection, I always mention Greg's and just have always great feedback on it. It was I loved all that stuff, but yeah, Canvas Lane was a tough area just because the size of the branch and just the amount of door knocking, which became challenging. But again, kind of cut my teeth there. Joe Morgan and I were there together for another 3 months, and then I moved to Greenock after that, and I was there for 7.5 months and had actually 4 different companions. I had one threesome there, so I got there with Kendrick Wollstonhume, another fabulous companion, great guy. And then we had Billy Wiggins, who was my zone leader when I first started. He joined us after he was an AP for I think about 6 weeks, and loved Billy Wiggins and had a great time with the 3 of them. And then I had Elder Rene Fierce from Switzerland, and I sent him home, I believe. I was his last companion. And then I trained Elder Stout in Greenock. Greenock was a fabulous area. There's a pretty good mix of urban and rural there because we covered all the way down, like over to the Isle of Dunoon, and then down to I think it was Lanark, or I can't remember, a little bit further south. But it's right there on the Firth of Clyde. Our apartment, or our flat, more appropriately, was overlooked the Clyde. We were on the 3rd floor on the right in the city center, and just had another great experience in Greenock. I think with my several different companions, I thought I'd be there for like 9 months. I loved it so much there, but kind of another tough place. The branch there was previously a U.S. or a Navy base that was in Dunoon, just really close to the Firth there, and so they at one time was just like bustling with Navy personnel and members, and then that base was shuttered, and so they had like this giant building that, and probably only about maybe 20 or 30 people attending at the time, but loved there.
Was it a ward?
I think it may have been. I actually can't remember. It was like it was a branch size. I mean, as far as the membership, but it may have been a formal ward, but it had a really big area. It was like you had Guruk and some other, like it was like a 30 or 40 minute drive to get from one point to another, just huge. But Bishop McIver there, I loved working with him. And Greenock, like we're just right there on the Clyde, walking through the city center. I just have great memories and a lot of good friends I made with both members and non-members alike in that area that I just loved it there. So that was another good stop for me. But yeah, 7.5 months, it was pretty long. I think that's kind of stretching it for most assignments, mission, right? I mean, do you want me to just keep going, or do you have any?
No, keep going. Whatever you want to share, it's all good.
Yeah. This is really fun. So I left Greenock and moved up to the Shetland Islands after Greenock. So I moved up there with Roman Bredlow. He's from Germany, another great companion. The Shetland Islands was a huge change from Greenock, not only because of the isolation, but the zone and some other things. You don't see other missionaries quite as much. For me, it was a great fit. I mean, I think getting on the ferry, it was about the first time I went up there, it was about a 14-hour ferry ride from Aberdeen. And I was actually on the boat alone, and just remember like, wow, this is 8 hours alone, felt like an eternity.
So Braidlow didn't come down to Aberdeen to meet you?
I don't think so. I think
Wow.
we switched, and I actually did that ferry ride twice by myself when we switched companions. But I mean, one of the big challenges for me on my mission is just being with someone all the time. Like I do like people, and I'm kind of fairly social, not really social, but the fact that I had to be with someone 24 hours a day was really hard. So that ferry ride, I remember like, wow, this is nice just to kind of be on my own and think and have some space to work through things. But as you're on that ferry ride, like this was in November. I think it's just harsh weather. I did get seasick and just felt horrible on that ride. But once I got to Lerwick, which is the kind of the main town there in Shetland, I felt much better. I met Roman and got to our flat on 22 Crowmate Lane. I still remember most of my addresses. But you're right by the water. I mean, you're right there in the kind of middle of the ocean, and our flat was, you could just walk down to the, forget what it's called, the promenade or the kind of walkway that goes around. And small town, incredible history. I think at that time it was a population of about 20,000 that was kind of scattered across the island. We had a car. That was my first car. And I had to drive. I can't remember exactly why. I didn't ever get my license, but I think because I was like close to a year there. I think it was.
Yeah, you could drive on our American license for a year. So
yeah, something like that. And that actually does remind me, I have to go backwards a little bit. During some of the companion changes, I actually got to serve with Alec Gilmore, Red Hawk Gilmore, in Paisley for about a week.
All right. We just spoke to him. His episode will be on here just before yours.
Great.
So
just absolutely love that guy. We had a great week together, kind of driving back and forth between our areas. So I drove with him a lot, which was really fun. But that was just a week or two that I'll remember forever with Elder Gilmore and running between Paisley and Greenock and trying to make things happen. But yeah, fabulous guy. So I forgot about that. So anyway, back to Shetland. Roman and I were there together, I think, for 3 months. And then we actually had some success there. We met, I think Roman had maybe met him before I got there, Malcolm Gray, who's a great guy there who was eventually baptized. But the branch there, we met in I think it was an old newspaper building that they leased out, and had a couple of really great families and some other members there. It was probably in that same range, about 20 to 30 that would be there, which is pretty strong for an island of size. But I was there from November to April ish, and so I was there during the really short days and driving around. They have a lot of crofts there, which are like small farms, and it got so dark so early that like going out and knocking doors was a little obtuse at times, because it was like you're kind of out in a isolated field and you don't really want to just show up at someone's house. We had to kind of be creative with how we contacted people. They did have a great city center there or a town center that you could go and meet people on the street. Eventually, just because of the size of the island, you actually got to know faces and people pretty quickly. So they kind of know to like look down when they walk by you, and they sort of know who you are. But the language there, so that's one thing I failed to mention. Moving from like Canvas Lane to Greenock, I was fine with the dialect and the changes. Picked up on the accent just fine. Shetland is a really different dialect. I think there's just the accent and even the words that they use and how they use them is almost like a different country. And so that did take a little bit more time to acclimate and understand people there. But love Shetland, love driving around. And I mean, just I've got pictures of just incredibly beautiful places that you could get to really quickly because it was so unpopulated, but no trees there. I mean, very few trees. It's a very
Too much wind.
wind, really stark landscape. I remember Kent Carish, I think he may have gone to Orkney to train. I think that was his first area. And he had kind of like told me what it was like to be on an island. And I said, oh, that sounds great. So anyway, eventually ended up on Shetland and had a great experience there. I saw the Northern Lights a few times, which was a kind of a great thrill, but just kind of a magical beauty on its own, the Shetland Islands. The starkness of it is kind of has its own charm and look to it, but just another unforgettable area for me. I flew down to his own conference in Aberdeen, I think once, and then the other 2 or 3 times were ferry rides. One of those was on my own, I think, to take Roman to get, I can't remember where he went, but then Glenn Parmenter joined me after Roman Bredlow, and
that's my group.
Yeah, so that's about the time you would have been there. So Glenn and I think we're there for 3 months together, and hopefully had a good experience, as it's a hard place to train.
He had good things to say. He was going to be on tonight, but his daughter got sick, so he couldn't join us. I was going to have him guest host with us, but
oh, great, yeah. I mean, Glenn was a blast. And just roaming around that island there's just nothing like it in the world to be there and to be living there as missionaries. Just a great connections and great memories there. Yeah, Glenn, I can't remember who replaced me after that, but once I left,
I think Robert Livingston came up there.
Okay, yeah, maybe that sounds right. So once I left, I became a zone leader in Motherwell, which was actually where canvas laying, my first kind of area, and actually one of the other things I didn't mention, one of the really eye-opening experience was I went to a Motherwell football match with Kent and some of the people in the zone. I think it was Boxing Day. So I was in the mission for like a month at that point, and I had been to rivalry games, Utah BYU games here, and some other things, but nothing compares to a Scottish Premier League football match. I mean, it was just the people and the language and all the other things. It was really fun, but I just remember thinking like, oh, we're missionaries and we're kind of in this rowdy environment, but it was a blast.
That helps you understand when you knock on people's doors and they say, "Sorry, I'm not interested. I'm a Celtic or I'm a Ranger."
Yeah.
That's important. It is a religion.
It really is. And even being like in canvas laying, you saw, so Park Head or Park Heat as they call it. That wasn't in our zone, but we were pretty close to it. So during games, it was, the train stations were always kind of rowdy and packed, but it was fabulous. It was great to go to that match, and just remember that sitting there and watching and just being like sort of flabbergasted at what was going on and the language and everything. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, back to Motherwell. I came down. That's a long trek going from Shetland to the west of Scotland there. And I was there in Motherwell with Joel Turvey for, I think it was just for 3 months. I have to verify that. Joel, another great companion, he came over and stayed with me and my family for a couple of weeks later after we both got back, and had a great time. But Joel and I were there in Motherwell. That was kind of the first time I was a zone leader, and had another Skyline connection, Catherine McConkey, who was, that was actually the next zone. But I was there, so I was able to go on exchanges, I think, to my old area, to Canvas Lane, which was fun. Yeah. And again, my best memories of Motherwell are the Saturday football matches. We'd meet up with a lot of the people from the ward and their friends to play, and it was a really good competitive game. I played soccer in high school, and I think most people were surprised that an American who could actually play. But I had those Saturday morning football matches were so much fun. We had some people that would come like as investigators or others. It was a great way to invite, but mostly it was just a great way to connect with the members, and I had a blast. It was a lot of fun. So I was there in Motherwell, and then I met Craig Mitchell and his family there. Craig and Andrea and their daughters were so young at the time. They're all much older now. And they were in Carstairs, which is a village kind of in Lanark, in the really beautiful rural area of where we covered. But love Craig. I stayed with his family for a couple of weeks, and I went back to Scotland to visit. Craig is Welsh, and he was baptized. I was able to go back and baptize him when I was in Livingston, my next area. But love Craig and his family dearly, and just had a great experience there with Joel. So yeah, so that was 3 months, and then I moved to Livingston, to that zone leader. We lived in a place called Bathgate, which was another great spot there. I was with Elder Mueller, another Swiss companion, so I had 2 Swiss companions on my mission. And then I had Simon White for, I think, just 6 weeks. We developed a great friendship, even though our time was really short. And then I was with Kevin Anderson, who's still a great friend today, for, I think it was 3 months, 6 weeks or 3 months. So I had a lot of companions there, just the way Elder Mueller went home when I was there. And then Simon, he became an AP, I think just after our first kind of transfer together. But yeah, we had a car there, and then Livingston had a lot of kind of cool towns and other places where I spent time, and I met Peter McIntyre there, who I was able to baptize actually in the Firth of Clyde, or sorry, the Firth of Forth.
The Firth of Forth.
Yeah, so we found a spot where we could kind of walk down in the water, and that was pretty magical.
That's cool.
And, yeah, so that was a lot of fun. And Peter was kind of a little bit older, not much than I was, and I spent probably a week or 2 with him when I went back to visit about a year or 2 later after I left the country. So that, Livingston was great. Yeah, a lot of great spots, a lot of really good companions, and Scotland. The more time I spent there, just the more right it felt, and the perfect fit for me as a missionary. Just the people and the way I was able to interact and enjoy my time there. So it lived up to his expectations as I talked through getting my call and all that. We had a mission president change in the midst of all that. So that's, I think Randy Wilkinson probably left about 9 months-ish into my mission, and then President Vriens and Sister Vriens arrived and sent me home. So,
and Elder Karras trained them too. So
yeah,
that's what President Vriens told me, since he was in the mission home when they came in.
That's right. Yeah, he was there. So they there's a lot to learn. I think just when you come into a mission, and when you go to an area, you have a trainer, but kind of overseeing the whole mission and understanding the dynamics of Scotland and the culture, and kind of how the church operates there. It's a huge job, but they did great. They were They were great. And then I think the APs, the office elders, all the others, just a top to bottom, pretty great experience.
Yeah. We've been asking everybody, do you have any specific memories of mission presidents, Wilkinson or Vriens?
Yeah. So President Vriens, he had a couple of really good catchphrases. Anytime we would talk on the phone, he'd say, "Is this the famous Elder Dunn?" And then anytime that you're in zone conferences or other places, spot on, Elder. He would use that to confirm whatever you're saying or agree with you. Yeah, President Vriens, like I had a couple of sort of challenging situations when I was in Livingston. Simon White wouldn't understand. There's kind of like a couple of new programs and other things going on, and President Vriens was great to kind of help me talk through what those were and what they meant and what it didn't mean, and just remember having a lot of good kind of counseling sessions with President Vriens. And I kind of remember, I don't know how I learned this, but the nickname that he hated was Corny. His middle name was Cornelius, and so I would sometimes bug him with Corny, and we had a good relationship. He invited me to a jazz game. He had great seats a little bit later, and when I was looking to work for Intermountain, Bill Nelson, who was a former CEO of the organization, I think is his neighbor, and he kind of helped me to get connected with him. But
cool.
Yeah, had a great set of mission presidents. I mean, they were different. I think if you served under both, their style and the way they approach things is totally different, but love them both.
Yeah, we've talked to people from the eras before and after the Vrienses, and I think that difference it's by design. Like,
yeah,
you got to have diversity among the missionaries and the leadership just to reach different people. So
absolutely. Yeah, so we I mean the change was fine, and I think even as you sort of move between different zones and different situations with district leaders and zone leaders and others, like it all varies quite a bit in how people lead and what their experience is, and you kind of had to, and that whole kind of routine of being able to move around and work with different people, that's been a big part of my career. Actually, as I've thought about like working in healthcare with physicians and business leaders, nurses, and others, is just that flexibility of being able to deal with different styles and different types of people has been a big part of why I like my job and working through that. So a lot of good ties back. And I mean, I'm still a Scotland junkie. I think anytime there's something going on, or when they had the independence vote or other things happening in the last few years, there's always like a great connection to what's going on there. And even with my children, so James Sterling has a good Scottish name. Cameron is another one of my kids, and then Alexis, her middle name's Mackenzie, spelled the Scottish way.
There you go.
So I've kept those connections to the country real. And anyway, I'd love to go back again. I've been there once by myself. I think if my kids are maybe a little bit older, Katie and I would like to go back and do a tour ourselves and check things out. But yeah, great.
What ages are your kids now? I don't think I caught that earlier.
Yeah, so James is 9, Alexis is 7, and then Cameron is 4, and then Beckett is just about 2 and a few months. So ages kind of 2 to 9. They're still pretty young, and a lot of variability. And like he's at soccer right now. He'll be home pretty soon, and then Beckett's in diapers and still taking naps and those sorts of things. So a lot of variability in what they're doing, but they all know about my Scottish heritage and my mission, and I still talk about it quite a bit. So
great. Yeah, some of those transferable skills, I was just thinking, even being able to understand people with different accents from there has benefited me as I've worked with different people in my professional life and in the church. So
Yeah, it still works. I mean, I occasionally will watch a lot of BBC shows, and um, I can still listen and hear it, and even like with Glaswegian or some of the Ned speak, if you remember Ned, Ned Late
yeah,
Talk, I can still kind of pick it up, which I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I haven't lost that touch yet. But even like when I came back, um, I didn't really recognize it, and I don't think anybody in the mission did. But a lot of people have said, like, why are you talking that way? Like, what is your accent? Because I kind of picked up a different way of speaking. You know, if I go back and listen to some tapes or other things of me talking, I don't sound Scottish, but I sound really different. And even when I talk to Scottish people now, I kind of get into
go
this.
back into it, saying
Yeah,
I and
exactly. Yeah. So
yeah,
I get into this weird sort of mind frame. But I'll still, like, when I was in St. George, um, I was just walking through the hospital there where I worked, and I heard this one lady just say two words, and I was actually wearing my tartan tie at the time, and I just went up and like, "Are you Scottish?" And said yes, and so we were able to kind of reminisce and think about things. But I, anytime I hear someone or see someone that has like a flag like you got, I always try and connect and talk to them and talk about Scotland. One couple I didn't mention that I also love dearly, the Wileys, Nancy and Sam Wiley. They were a missionary couple when I was in Greenock and in that area in Paisley, and they're from Canada, but they were actually from Scotland originally, so they moved to Canada. So if anybody that's listening remembers them, they've both passed away now, but the Wileys were another fantastic friends that when they would come to Salt Lake, I would go and meet them, and they were just great people. I want to make sure I mention them. But yeah, so that's kind of the long and the short of it. Anything else you wanted me to cover? I kind of ran through quite a bit here, but
were you out there when Preach My Gospel rolled out?
yeah, so that was it was definitely the second half of my mission. We had sort of the original discussions that Kent kind of forced me to memorize with, walking around with those little notebooks and little things.
Flip chart and all that.
Yeah, flip charts. Yeah, I think I kept some of those, but yeah, so Preach My Gospel started. I definitely had it going when I was in Livingston. I can't remember. It maybe even started when I was in Motherwell with Joel at Turvey, but to me, it was like still, I had the discussions memorized and kind of still carried that through for the rest of my mission. But I think the flexibility of that was a big change and sort of spending. I remember sitting with Kevin Anderson, and we were planning and thinking about how to structure a lesson. And this was in Bathgate where we lived, Livingston area. And I remember it like got to like 11:30 or something, and we're just like, wait, what are we doing? It's so late. But that kind of mind frame of being a little bit more deliberate about how you teach and what you cover, and kind of formulating it from the ground up, I think was a really good change. But for coming from the really structured sort of routine of the discussions, it was different. One thing I know that doesn't happen anymore. We got a lot of like these VHS referrals, they're called. I don't know if you remember.
Media referrals.
Yeah, where they saw a commercial for Finding Faith in Christ, or there was a Joseph Smith video that came out, and so we had a bunch of the VHS tapes that we would hand deliver and see if they wanted to hear a message. Anyway, I just have kind of these things that are popping into my head, and just making sure.
The best media referral I had was we got, it came from through the mission home or whatever, and they said you need to take I think it was Finding Faith in Christ out to this lady, and it was fairly far out in our area, so a couple of bus transfers to get there, and planned a part of our day to make it all the way out there. And we've knocked on this lady's door, said, "Hey, we brought you this video that you called for, and we've got a message to go along with." And she said, "Oh, I don't need that anymore. When I called, I thought I was going to die, but I'm better now." So,
Yeah.
so I don't need
it. I mean, a lot of the times when we did those media referrals, a lot of the people claimed that they didn't order it. Like, "Oh, I don't."
That
really
wasn't
know
me.
it.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "You have their name and their address and how." But I think they're usually surprised that it was like not coming in the mail and all that. But yeah, I mean, I have like sometimes this happened more when I was in North Carolina, but there are certain smells that just kind of bring Scotland back. One of those, if you remember, like ever getting off a bus when it was raining or something like that, the smell of rain with like tobacco smoke is just one of those things that just like felt so Scottish to me. But I even in Canvas Lane, we had the distillery that you get the whiskey smell and other things, but there are certain things that just totally nail it for me.
Yeah, take you right back.
Yeah, it's great. But yeah, those media referrals, and do you remember the blue schedules that you folded into thirds and all those things?
I was watching The Best 2 Years with my kids just the other week, and they're using one of those to plan in there, and I said, "I have some of those if you want to see them." They're like, "What? How?"
Yeah, all those things were great. It's great to kind of think through, and I've still got some, like, if you remember the Harvester, the monthly publication, I saved a few of those that had a meaning to me that I need to probably pour through. But yeah, I'm just fabulous. So what else? I mean, do you want any stories? I could probably talk for ages about this, but
yeah, sure. Couple stories. Give us. Let's see if you think of an entertaining running with the Neds or anything like that, but also if you've got just a spiritual experience that you reflect back on. Love to hear both.
Yeah. So in Canvas Lane, we had run-ins with Neds all the time. I think I didn't quite understand when I got there that culture and kind of the angry youth that I'd heard about. Some attacks and some other things before I got there that I was like, "Oh, Scotland and gangs," and I'm like, that doesn't really match up in my head. But when you get there, you kind of understand like where you are and how dangerous it can be. But had some bottles thrown at us. I think Kent Karish and I in a place called Castle Milk. I remember that happening. The 37 bus took us there. I still remember the bus route. But yeah, I mean, we got harassed. I do remember being called like CID quite a bit. I think there was some sort of police there. Occasionally we'd be mistaken for Jehovah's Witnesses or others. But yeah, I don't know. I think generally, like I remember sometimes feeling unsafe, but never felt in danger. Unfortunately, we did have some missionaries that had bad attacks, I think, before I got there and even while I was there. But one kind of memorable experience, there was I can't remember his name now, maybe Wiseman Dairy. Anyway, one of the big milk companies, I was in East Kilbride on an exchange. I don't remember who I was with, sadly, but we were just out chopping, and we actually met, and he invited us as in the owner of, I think it's Wiseman Dairy, but one of the big bell. Yeah, I can't remember it, but anyway, he was the owner, elderly at the time, but just kind of a fun experience where you got to to meet someone and go into their home, and he was actually kind to us and listened, and we were on our way. But that was a lot of fun. I mean, I have so many stories. I'm trying to to filter through. That wasn't a very good one, but
That's all right.
I remember, meeting up with missionaries from other zones in Glasgow and just having a great time, kind of being with some other people and that. I think relative to like other stories, I don't know, I may think of one now, but like spiritual experiences, I had a lot of great moments, a lot of highs and lows. Obviously, I never thought about like going home, because to me it was, at minimum, it was just a great adventure. But there was one time this was in Bathgate. There's a place called Knock Hill, which is kind of an overlook point over that whole area of Bathgate and Bog Hall and Livingston. But I remember spending some time up there with Simon White, and just kind of praying and thinking about what to do, and just having really distinct feelings, not necessarily words of what to do and where to go. And then we did have some success there with meeting people and others, but that was really great. I think baptizing Peter in the first, and baptizing Craig and meeting them, and seeing their families kind of grow along in the process was another great high for me. But overall, I think the entire experience of kind of moving around with different companions and thinking about how to approach the work, and just that immersive experience of being focused on one thing for most of the day is just kind of unprecedented in life now. Even with like your career or school or other things, there's nothing quite matches that really experience of focusing and thinking about things. But a lot of great experiences. But yeah, stories, I don't know, I have so many, and now I can't really think of one. I think I one of my highs was with Kent Carish and getting to be companions with him, and just a kind of a fabulous moment for me. But yeah, I don't know if I think there's something after we talk, I'll send you a note or something. But I think I've shared a lot of sort of little snippets here and there, which is kind of the story for me. So
that's fine. It's been great as we've gone through this to kind of piece together a timeline before and after, and as we moved throughout the country, there were coming and goings and crossing paths with different people that I'm sure the names you've mentioned will ring a bell with quite a few, and some great companions you've had. So it's been awesome, and appreciate you giving the time to be on.
Yeah. Thanks for putting this together, both to both of you. It's even just to kind of reflect and talk through it. I've just more excited about writing some things down and going back and thinking about this. So thank you for highlighting it, even though it's been 20 years. It's still very fresh for me in some ways.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it, man.
Better get this recorded now and audioly, and 20 more years from now we can look back at this. So
yeah, it'll be a great archive. But yeah, thanks for making the effort and thinking about this. I think it's great, and I appreciate what you've done so far. No.
Well, thank you. It's our pleasure. All right. Well, we'll let you know when it's published, and you can share it with family and friends and companions. Reach out to Kent, tell him he's got to come on.
Yeah, you got it.
All right.
Thanks for your time. Take care. No.
Thank you. Good night.